You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
We're back.
We are back. We've figured out that that's from the Bigfoot or Littlefoot dinosaur theory. What was that called? I can't even remember.
No, we figured out it was from a special that was done with Walter Cronkite did it, I think for Disney Studios.
Oh.
Maybe for Spielberg. He's the one that wrote it. But it was about dinosaurs returning to the modern world. We're back. And so then they had characters in the show that were dinosaurs, which is different from the Littlefoot series. Littlefoot, that's what it was.
Yeah, but it was called, what was it called? Was it just called Dinosaur? It wasn't just called Dinosaur. It was called, The Land Before Time.
The Land Before Time.
The Land Before Time. Yeah. Okay.
Because you don't have time until you have a clock.
That's been bugging me. I'm glad that we got that off my consciousness.
So I'm so glad we could help.
Yeah. I am aware that for decades after I met you, you would tell me all the time that you did not need to go to therapy.
It's important to be aware.
It's important to be aware of things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And eventually you did go to therapy, and you have really said very positive things about your experience.
Yeah.
So what I am wondering is, do you think the average experience of a person going to therapy is positive or negative?
Well, according to the article that you sent me from Wired Magazine, you said 50 to 75% of the people who go to therapy say it was a good experience for them. 5% get worse.
Yeah.
So that leaves a big range.
Yeah.
It's an individual, presumptively an individual decision.
Right.
Was it good for me? But a lot of times there are other players in the therapy marketplace. And so they have to also agree that it's beneficial for you to have gone to therapy.
And that's exactly the point that I wanted to make, is that there's the individual experience, which we would call transference, so the client's experience of what they got out of therapy. There's the therapist's experience of what happened in therapy, which is
it was really good for me. You paid your bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there are a lot of people who are invested in the process that aren't in that room. So there are people who do research on therapy, who live in ivory towers and work in universities and things like that. Then there are insurance companies who are ostensibly responsible for paying the bill and invested in whether or not the outcomes are positive or negative. And then there are a bunch of people nowadays who are writing blogs or posting information on
people like us,
the internets. Well, I mean, we're experts. I mean, we are actually legitimately experts in this field. But, there are a lot of people, I mean, just this guy who's writing this Wired magazine, I mean, he's got a very, very particular opinion about what therapy is and what's his claim to fame. He writes for Wired magazine. So there's a lot of noise out there. And some of it might be good, some of it might be accurate, some of it might be
There are
beneficial.
also courts and employers who have a weigh-in on whether or not therapy is required and whether or not it's been productive in terms of decision-making that they're involved in.
And there's an evolution of what therapy looks like. I mean, there's more and more, there's Headspace, there's BetterHelp, there's more and more companies that are promoting to the public that you can get therapy on your smartphone, which I abjectly disagree with. There's no therapy, and I don't care who you are. I don't care if you think you've got a degree and are doing the therapy, or if you think you are receiving therapy. If you are texting somebody on your phone, you're not doing therapy, period. And I don't care who says that is therapy. That's not therapy. That's not therapy that, as I understand it. Now,
That's an important qualifier, as you understand it, as you would define it.
yeah.
Yeah. There are other people that would disagree with you. You know, one of the questions in any society is how much can we afford to spend on it? You have to make a decision. Can I afford therapy? And what this article in Wired Magazine says is that right now it's a rich white man's game. That wealthy white people can afford to go to therapy and pay the dollars because insurance companies are not paying enough to offset the cost. Some of them pay some, but again, you have to be white and rich enough to have insurance, you know, to even be involved in that conversation. So his argument goes on to say there are so many people that are emotionally distressed and disturbed and mentally ill in our culture right now who are out of balance or off balance, and the government needs to be doing something about it. Which I would like to see the conversation about how you're going to have the government make people go to therapy, who's going to decide who you send them to and how much gets paid, and you know, I mean, there's so many complexities about all that. But anyway, his bone of contention is there are lots and lots of people in America right now that are suffering from anxiety, stress, depression, and other concerns who might benefit from therapy if they could find the right therapist, and if the therapist was skilled and competent and helpful. Then he goes into a sub-discussion about what constitutes right therapy and what constitutes skilled and competent and helpful. Are there theories of therapy that make more sense for some kind of clients, like obsessive compulsive, versus other kinds of clients like depressed? And how do you know? Now, how do you find a therapist? And is it possible for a therapist to be skilled multimodally? I can work well with people that are depressed, well with people that have anxiety, well with people that are borderline. Or is that impossible and I should just specialize in one diagnostic category? So it's a complex conversation. One of the outcomes of the pandemic in the last 3 years is that more and more people have attempted to get therapy online from an actual therapist over a video channel that's encrypted and protected privacy and all that. But you can see your client from wherever they may be in their home or across the country and work with them that way. That's not the traditional concept of doing therapy, but it's been going on for now a number of years. When I first became aware of what they call distance counseling, the American Counseling Association said, oh, no way in hell, that's not therapy, you can't do that, that's unethical. They have evolved. Now they give certifications in distance counseling. And they say, oh, if we tell you that you're good at it, that you have these skills that we've required, and you demonstrate that to us, then we'll give you a certificate, and we'll tell the whole world that you should be a distance counselor.
And the pandemic changed that even further, because in the United States, they suspended all prohibitions against distance therapy during the pandemic. And so now,
those are legal, though. That wasn't counseling. That was like, I'm not licensed in the state of Montana,
right?
So I can't counsel somebody that's in Montana.
Right.
But now I can, because of the pandemic and the suspension of those legal rules.
Although that's still state by state. So the way that it reads right now in Missouri is that you can do distance therapy if the United States, if currently the law that said that was suspended is still in effect.
Right. But when it closes down, then you have to come back.
We don't know. And that's where people are at now, is that if the pandemic is over and now the government's going to say, oh, there's no
reason to continue
that, then what are the individual states? We don't know what the individual states are going to do.
But that's an offshoot of what you were trying to get to, because you were saying that the insurance companies are investing money, and some therapy provider systems are investing money in trying to create artificial intelligence device that can substitute for a therapist. So you can talk to your cell phone, and it has a built-in program that will come back with like, oh, that's terrible, tell me more. And have you just talk into the ether, and the artificial intelligence will give you verbiages in a soothing tone that will help you alleviate your distress or help refocus you in a positive direction so that you make healthier choices.
Right.
And they're experimenting with that because it's cheaper than therapy.
Yeah.
If I buy the program and institute it and sell it to people at $10 a session, I'm making lots of money off the internet, and that person is getting the benefit
Right.
of qualified therapy.
And I know for a fact that that's
Yeah.
happening because when I was working as the clinical director of an EAP, an Employee Assistance Program, I saw an
They were
early version of
experimenting
this
with several,
5 years ago,
Yeah.
and we actually had license for one of these bots that we had on a platform that we used on cell phones so that employees could type in, and for, just easy kind of questions saying, oh, I'm lonely or I'm depressed, the bot would talk to them, and then if you said, oh, I'm suicidal, then it
Kicks you up to a
shunted you
person.
into a call center. But I know for a fact that that's happening. I know that BetterHelp and Headspace, while yes, they do have licensed therapists, that you don't always know whether you're talking, they can tell you that you're talking to a licensed therapist, but you may, in some case, because you're going to sign an end user license, a EULA, that says that they can introduce the bot to you and that you are okay with that. You're going to sign that. You're not going to read the EULA, so you don't know that that's in there, but I can tell you that that's in there. And so you don't know whether you're talking to a therapist or not. And my concern is, we've talked about this 100 times if we talked about it once. How much of human communication are words?
7%.
Or less.
Yeah.
Depending on the study that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Which means that at least 93% is not the words. If you are talking to a bot on text, you only get up to 7% because you're only getting the words. You're not getting anything else. You're not getting, because you had said earlier, well, the tone of that. There is no tone in a text. There's no tone. I don't care how many emojis there are. There's no inflection. There's no other information other than the words themselves. And we know that can't be more than 7% of the communication.
I also have a question about whether or not those programs can be written from a religious or philosophical perspective to propagandize you.
Of course. Not only a religious, but a social person. When we first started writing intellectual testing, right?
Yeah.
So the WAIS, the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Adults, and the Myers-Briggs, the Binet, the Stanford Binet. So the Binet was the French guy who wrote the test for France, and then it was imported by Stanford University and adapted for American populations, and that's where we get the Stanford Binet test. But we've looked at those, and we know that those are culturally sensitive.
Well, the U.S. Army used a nonverbal IQ test in World War I called the Raven test. That because so many of the draftees that were coming into the Army were not educated, couldn't read and write. So for the Army to make determinations in advance about where do we place this person to our advantage for the best usage, had to have some sense of their capacity, so they developed this nonverbal IQ test.
And what they found out was that those were culturally sensitive. So what happens is you can't not write something as culturally biased because you're not even aware. It's unimplied. It's implicit. Biased. It's not intended. It's just a part of who you are. And so you write the test, or you write the protocol, or you write the algorithm for the bot from your own cultural perspective, which isn't universal.
Yeah. Well, I used to teach basic psych courses in high school and college, and one of the things we always talked about was xenophobia and ethnocentrism. And the cultural value of, when God created the fork, he told us the correct way to hold the fork, and eat with a fork. And then if you look to a different culture where they hold it differently, you instinctively
or use
and
chopsticks.
Emotionally know that they're wrong and you're right. Because your culture was the mandated culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm so worried. I mean, this article that I sent you is about why therapy is broken from the perspective of being able to go out and get therapy. But
in mass market consumption,
Yeah.
people with less money, without insurance, but with aggressive need for some attention and some support. If the systems are broken, if the institutional systems of society are not working, if they ever work, but if they're not working now, then how do we help all those people who are, as Emil Durkheim would have said, experiencing suicidal needs, suicidal desires, because they're disconnected, they're broken away from their support.
Right.
It's an interesting article. It raises a lot of great questions.
Let's go to our break, and we'll pick this up on the other side.
Yeah.
Hey, Brett.
Yes.
What's your favorite thing about Psych with Mike?
The opportunity to engage in mental gymnastics with you.
Wow, that is really powerful. So,
it's fun.
do you think that that's beneficial for other people?
I have no clue. I would hope so, but I have no clue.
So people should write us and let us know.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That would be great.
Especially if they agree with me.
As always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. And, my concern is that there are people who are trying to answer the question that this article asks, which is, how do you make therapy more accessible to larger numbers of people? There are people who are writing these bots, and they're going to say, hey, look, you can get this on a bot, but it's going to be like Candy Crush, right? People download Candy Crush, they play the game. 99% of people don't ever buy anything in the game. But the 10% of people, or 1% of people, however many it is, who do buy something in the game support financially the game. And the game is huge, right? Across the world. That's going to be the way they're going to treat psychology. Is there's going to be bots. You're going to access it on your smartphone. It's going to be a free service. But there are also going to be catches in there for ways that you can spend your money. And that's how they're going to support financially the app. And those apps are going to be written by people who don't have any real background in psychology. They're going to be written by algorithms that put together words that are statistically found to be
So those
soothing.
are legitimate concerns, Michael, and you articulate it well. But the same issue comes up with real therapists. Who gets to decide what constitutes good therapy? Mm-hmm. Is it the marketplace? I mean, if people come to you and pay you money, obviously they think you're doing a good job, or they wouldn't come and they wouldn't pay you money. Mm-hmm. But are there licensure requirements that guarantee this person is qualified? Mm-hmm. Are there general agreements within the practice of psychotherapy about skills and techniques that everybody should have, frames of knowledge or reference that they should be aware of when they try to practice? I mean, do you know Gestalt therapy techniques? Mm-hmm. Should you know in order to practice your skill set? Do you know dialectical behavioralism? Do you know the different buzzwords? Mm-hmm. Do you know what they all mean? Mm-hmm. And can you use those skills? And if you can, and if you do they work?
Yeah.
What's the outcome?
So like I said before, we're experts. We actually legitimately are. We know what all those things mean. We could explain them in intricate, explicit detail that nobody would want to listen to. But here's my thing, is that when we're talking about real people, and that being policed, for lack of a better term, by the states and the organizations, right? You have to apply for a license, and then I'm more comfortable with that than having big companies write psychological algorithms that end up being promoted for free on smart devices. I like the system better the way it is now. I feel more confident, right? So the average person has no idea what the 4 independent licensures are in Missouri, and they don't need to. And they don't know what it takes to get any of those licenses, and they don't need to. Now, hopefully they know that if they're not getting what they want, that there are remedies that they can access if they're in a situation that they feel like they're getting bad therapy.
Well, that's one of the benefits of the licensure system. There's a structure that you're accountable to.
Who are you going to call when the bot messes you up?
Yeah. Yeah, great question.
I mean, these bots aren't going to get regulated under licensure laws in any individual state. So when the bot tells you something, when you type in, hey, I'm feeling suicidal, and the bot's like, well, maybe you should think about that. And then you think, oh, well, the bot's telling me to go kill myself. And you've been now harmed by the bot. Who you're not going to call Ghostbusters. Who are you going to call? And that's what I am desperately. So I believe therapy is broken, not because of and I don't necessarily disagree with anything that is in this article. And I would like for therapy to be more universally available. And certainly I think that the way that you do that is you get behind some kind of program of universal health care that covers mental health. And I know that that's a bad word for a lot of people, but I don't see how we ever fix that, right? Unless everybody has access to it, universal access to it. And even then, some people won't go, but at least they'd have access to it. But what are you going to do when the bots are out there?
Well, but you go back to the fight over the licensure laws in the state of Missouri. I was practicing with a private practice before Missouri passed a licensure law. I didn't have a license. I had an education.
Yeah, because there wasn't a license. I mean,
because it wasn't required. They didn't have one.
Yeah, just by.
So then the state legislature decided to have the conversation about, well, maybe we should license this profession this way. Then the competing licensure organizations, the social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, lobbied the state legislature for particular twist in the writing of the law to say, well, okay, if we're going to give them this license, they need to have this amount of education, they need to have had this course, they need to have this training, that should allow them to treat this but not this. Those decisions were not made on what's the best scientific information. They were made based on what the lobbyists for the different organizations were able to persuade the legislators to vote for. So licensing in and of itself is a state regulatory system, but it doesn't guarantee good therapy, and it doesn't guarantee access to the populace.
But I like that system better. I think there's
than just having bots.
Better chances than having apps on a smartphone.
I agree.
And I think that or my concern is that what's happening is that the marketing budgets of these companies that are writing these algorithms are huge, and they're putting this out there like, hey, you can be some guy in Montana who lives in the middle of nowhere and have access to therapy. You can be an unprivileged person advantage in the middle of Chicago.
If you live in outstate Missouri, there are places where you have to drive 100 miles to find a doctor, any kind of doctor, not just a mental health doctor.
That's right. And so I'm saying that I would rather that person be online with somebody than not have therapy at all.
Artificial intelligence. Yeah.
But the artificial intelligence is a scary thing that is being injected into our profession and being promoted as the next big thing in psychology. And I think the more that people, whether you are consumers of the product or your practitioners, the more that people in general on both sides buy into that, the less good that psychotherapy is going to be.
It's riding a wave.
Yeah.
Over the course of my work life, I've seen it change a lot, and it's continuing to evolve. So it still will. I mean, you raised good questions. I don't know that you have good answers.
No, I don't have any answers other than if you are looking for psychotherapy, please
find a real person.
Find a real person, yeah. Whether that is you go to their office or I don't like the telehealth, but it's better than the application on a smartphone. Please do that. Yeah. And don't buy into the hype of, you can't access this on your smartphone, because there's a lot of bad information. There's a lot of people who are investing a lot of money in promoting this idea that these apps on a smartphone are at least as good, if not better, than a real person, and that this is the next wave of psychotherapy. If you're a practitioner, it's short-sighted to buy into that because you're putting yourself out of a job. If you're a consumer, it's short-sighted to buy into that because that's not psychotherapy.
If you have the choice. you may be mandated to use that system by your insurance or your employer.
Of course. And yeah, if you don't, I mean, if you're funneled into that system, there's nothing that we can do about it other than, you can say this isn't satisfying my needs and I need something more. And hopefully eventually they'll ratchet you up into a category of going to talk to an actual real live person. But so for me, again, I don't necessarily disagree with anything that is in this article, but the way that I see therapy being broken is that I see people buying into this idea that we should get more universal access. And the reason that they're saying that is because they're trying to transition this over to apps on a smartphone, and that's not the solution. We need a solution. What we need is universal mental health care that allows every individual to seek therapy just because they want it and no other reason. But until we get that...
I don't know that I agree with you.
Why?
I don't know. I'm feeling that those kind of systemic universal answers never work out.
Well, of course they don't work. But is that better than bots on a smartphone?
I don't know. I really don't know. I agree with your concerns about the quality of that performance, but I also wonder if that's all you can get and it calms you down if you can refocus yourself. Is that beneficial? I think there can be demonstrated cases where it is or has been beneficial.
Well, but that's the problem, is that's idiosyncratic. So that's
so
evidence
therapy.
of one.
So it's therapy one-on-one, face-to-face. I've had clients that come in that look at me and say, I can't talk to you, you're a bozo, and get up and leave.
But there's a huge amount of evidence that shows pretty conclusively that therapy is beneficial.
There's a huge amount of survey data that people say it was. I mean, I don't know that there is a measurement device that is consistently reliable across all the spectrums by which we measure the impact of therapy.
Well, but people...
we have anecdotal, personal...
No. I mean, there's actual statistical research evidence that demonstrates that therapy... And we actually have good research studies that show that
chase
therapy...
the labels. The data says, what's the percentage of people out there with multiple personality disorder? So they do some research and they come up and say, you know what, let's change the name on that. Let's call it dissociative identity and put it on a spectrum of severity. And then our numbers will be what we need them to be. So that's what they do. So then they say, well, our data proved.
No, I understand that. But I'm saying there's actual there's actual research studies that show that talk therapy is actually beneficial in 20% of cases. So it seems really small, but it's large when you think about.
I agree with you.
Yeah, the total population. There are actually studies that demonstrate conclusively, even the American Medical Association agrees with this, that talk therapy is actually more effective.
Put that on all the prescriptions
than pharmaceutical therapy.
Exactly.
Right? And so you're supposed to prescribe talk therapy concomitant in conjunction with psych drugs whenever you prescribe them.
Right.
Not all doctors do that. Right. But there's a...
I don't disagree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I still am hesitant to buy a pig in a poke. Just a summary judgment.
Well, and this is what you say to me all the time, and you are 100% correct, that I have a tendency to take something and then universalize it
out. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And yes, so clearly that I shouldn't talk in absolutes.
Oh man. Thank you for saying that.
And I know that is something that I do, and I get fired up and I want to say, this would save the world, but
there's a rightness in your speech, even if there's not a righteousness in your speech.
But the point being that we know therapy is good. We know that it helps people. I want it to be more accessible. I believe that would
disagreeing with each other.
Yeah, that would be helpful if there was some kind of universality of access, so that every individual knew that they had the ability to be able to seek therapy, that it wasn't based on their socioeconomic status. and I know that that's not going to be 100% of a cure, but I believe that's better than trying to to privatize this and put it into the purview of companies that want to write algorithms and convince people that that is as good or better than seeking in-person psychotherapy.
Okay, so distinction. Not as good, not better, but maybe still beneficial.
But still beneficial, yeah. I mean, I've said,
Yeah, you
so
did.
for me,
Yeah.
for
Go up
me,
the hierarchy.
one-to-one therapy
Yeah.
is the best. That's the gold standard. Then telehealth, where you're looking at a person through a device, whether that is your smartphone but it's a real person, or your computer.
Yeah.
That's second best. Then therapy by text with a real person is third best. Then the last thing would be these bots, if that's the only access that you have. But clearly, there are some things that a bot can't handle.
For my thinking, the bots is just a step up from journaling.
Yeah,
There's all kinds of literature and research that shows journaling is beneficial, and people are encouraged to journal in all kinds of therapy settings. I think the bots are technological journaling with some interaction. And I don't think they're universally bad. I just don't think they're good therapy for serious issues.
Well, I don't think that they're universally bad.
Right.
But I think that we are being conditioned to believe that they are good.
Or to not know the difference.
Right.
When you're signing the EULA agreement.
Right.
Who am I talking to today?
Right.
Oh, this is Joe. I live in India.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know that we solved anything, but we sure did have a passionate conversation.
Amen.
The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. If you have any questions or comments, if you have some feedback about this subject or anything else that you hear on Psych with Mike, you should contact Brett at contact the show at psychwithmike.com. If you would like to do us a solid, then you should go onto the YouTubes and find us and subscribe to the show, or find us on Apple Podcasts and leave us a comment and a rating. That helps lots of people be able to find the show, and we would really, really appreciate that. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.